Hello and welcome. In this video, we shall be building a clone of Laravel from scratch. This is going to be a way more advanced video, so if you think you're an experienced PHP developer, this is the right video for you. So before we begin, let me tell you a story. When I was a child and I started programming, someone told me about Laravel. I started using it and I was like, oh my god, that's magic! Because almost everything was abstracted away. I was used to writing raw database queries, I was used to manual routing, I was used to manual validation, and all of it was just magically automated. And I wondered how exactly all this was happening. So I just got the idea. We didn't have ChatGPT back then, but I just got the idea to write my own MVC framework like Laravel from scratch. And I got to it. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort. I managed to write my own ORM engine from scratch. I even managed to write my own rendering engine like Blade. I wrote an MVC manager, and in the end, I had an almost complete framework that I used in several different projects of my own. And like you might guess, one day I just deleted it accidentally. I didn't have a backup available, I was deleting junk files, and I just ended up deleting my framework. But still, when I look back to that framework, it was something really ambitious and something I can really look back to. And it taught me a lot about how MVC framework works. We are going to dig back into those internals right now. We are going to build a lot of this once more. And we are going to build a really simple project similar to Laravel that can take some data and render some output just like Laravel and automate away all the abstractions. And if you like the video, I am going to convert that into a complete series where we build the entire ORM engine and rendering engine once more. And if you like, we can even dig into the internals of Laravel itself, and I am going to explain how exactly everything fits together. So let's get started. For today, our aim is pretty simple. We are not going to implement any ORMs or database integration. We just need to implement a key feature. We would be able to create controllers, define routes, and we would be able to return a JSON response from our controllers. And we should be able to add additional controllers and extend our system without having to rewrite the entire framework. Let's begin. I am going to launch VS Code and create a new folder. Let's go ahead, open a new folder. I am going to add another folder and simply name that framework. And we would begin by creating a folder structure. I am going to follow the folder structure of Laravel itself, create an app folder. Inside of it, I am going to create another folder and name that HTTP. And inside of it, I am going to create another folder and name that controllers. Similarly, I am going to create one more folder, name that config. And inside of it, I am going to create a file called routes.php which is going to contain our routes. And then I am going to create one more folder. Let's call that framework. And this is where our main code is going to live. So let's begin by creating an index.php file. And I am just going to say echo test php open. We're going to save that file. And now to launch it, most of the times you can launch it by clicking go live, but I am going to launch it by using a specific command. And to support that command, let's open terminal. And I am going to run a command called composer init. And this is basically going to create a composer file which would allow us to specify commands like serve, which through which we could start our project without having to write manual PHP commands. Let's call that framework. Okay, fine. I'm going to use default values for all of them. No, no. Add PS4. Again, we are going to follow the default mapping. And there we go. Now, inside the composer.json, I'm going to add scripts. Here, I'm going to add a new script, call that dev, and I am going to write PHP index.php. And now we could start our project by using composer dev. There we go. And now we need to modify our command slightly to launch a server in PHP that continues to run. To do that, we need to modify this to php-s index.php, and let me specify the URL as well. We are going to run once more, and there we go. Perfect. Now we are going to modify from here. I am going to go inside the framework. Here I am going to create a new file and call that entrypoint.php, and this file is going to start everything. Let's declare the class entryPoint. I need to take a single method, a single parameter. Let's call that a route. I am going to say $this route equals to $route protected $route. There we go. And I am going to add one more method which is going to start our application, and that would be named run. You don't need to do anything here. Now back to this. We are going to consider for now that our route is part of our get parameters, and we could get it like this. If it's empty, we are going to default to index. $r equals to, or let's just default to slash. Now we are going to instantiate our entry point class. Let's call that app equals to new entry point. We also need to specify our namespace so it can be auto-loaded. Therefore, I am going to go up and add a namespace called framework. Now here I need to import my namespace as well, which would be imported automatically when I select my class. I am going to pass my route in there. And finally, I am going to call app-run. And this is it. Our index.php is complete. We are ready to move on to our entry point class. Here I need to get my routes. And to manage our routes, we are going to create another class and call that routes or routes.php. So let's go back, new file, routes.php. I am going to declare another class called routes, and this is going to be a static class. Let's add an static array, protected static array $routes. We are going to add a protected function called route, $route, $method. Here I am going to check if our routes array contain the route already. $this routes, not this, sorry, static. If static $routes, $route, dollar static, $routes, $route equals to this, and then here I am going to say static $routes, $route, seriously, $method equals to, we also need to take a controller action which would be stored here. There we go. And now I am going to specify some public functions that we can use to bind our routes to get and post methods. Let's add a method called get route, and then I am going to add our action. Static route, $route, get $action, and we can just duplicate it to create a post method as well. Here we go. Oh, let me just make a little change. Okay, it should do anyway. Okay, let's go back. And here we are going to resolve our route, find a controller, import it, and run our action. In order to do this, I am going to add another method. Let's add it at the top. Public static function resolve $route. We also need a method, $method. And here I am going to return static $routes, $route, and $method. And this concludes our routes class. We're going pretty simple right now. We are not adding any error handling or dynamic routes or fallbacks. We are just going with some default actions. Let's go back. Here I am going to resolve my route. Let's say $action equals to routes resolve dollar. Oh, this is an instance variable, so $route. Back to here, I am going to add my namespace. Save once more. And for the method, I am going to add $_. If I remember correctly, this is $http $_server HTTP method. Sorry, not HTTP method, request method. Now I am going to consider that we register routes as an array with the first parameter being the controller and the second parameter being our action. So to follow our strategy, I am going to do $controller equals to $action 0, $action equals to $action 1. I am going to create a new instance of a controller, $instance equals new $controller, and then I am going to perform $instance $action. And this is the most important part of our framework. Let me define that in a moment. We are going to go back. I'm going to open my PHP and I shall call routes get slash. Let's consider that we also make a controller, home controller.php. I'm going to define everything in a moment. I'm just trying to complete my example. Add a function called get return hello. This is a function that we are going to invoke through a URL. I am going to pass the name of my controller as the first parameter and the name of my action, which is get, as the second parameter. So to do that, I am going to specify home controller class and then get. So what exactly all this is doing? Well, first of all, we are using the routes get method to add a route to this array. Once we call the resolve method by using the same slash route, this is going to return this array. The first parameter is the name of the home controller's class and the second parameter is name of the method. Now back to here, I am instantiating a dynamic class. I'm just telling PHP that there is going to be a class called home controller and I want an object of this. This is going to create its instance and then I am going to call my action, which is also dynamic, on that instance. I just told PHP that I want to call an action called get and that get is stored in a variable. This is a slightly complicated concept, but just remember that PHP replaces the name of the class or the value of the variable in place of its variable and then create the class. Now we are going to process our response. I am going to add if the response is string exit $response or maybe do echo instant. Otherwise, I am going to do echo JSON encode $response and then HTTP. What did I do? Oh, and then I am going to add a header content type application slash JSON. And this is it, we're ready to go. Let's start our server again. And inside the index.php, we have simply created our entry point class, but once I go back and refresh, first of all, this makes an error that r isn't a variable. We would need to add a fallback value. Next, it says that class entry point is not found. And the reason is that we don't have an autoloader in place. The class is specified in this file, we are calling it here, and we haven't included it by using our include or required method. Therefore, we would either need to require this class manually by using something like this, require once slash framework slash entry point.php, save, refresh again, and now it tells us that routes class is also not found. And we can continue to load those classes, but what we are going to do is that we are going to create an autoloader so all those classes are loaded automatically. So let me describe that in more detail. I am going to add a new file and call that autoloader.php. Here I am going, let me open PHP first. I am going to add a function called autoload that takes a class name. For now, we are just going to widen that class name and exit. And then I am going to call SPL autoload register autoload. Um, I guess I need to add a callback instead like this. Perfect. So what exactly I am doing is that I am telling PHP that once you need a class and it's not found in the current file, you need to call this method and it's going to return our class. For now, I am just going to save that, go back to index.php, and we are going to require that file at the top. Framework slash autoloader.php, save, and then we are going to refresh and it's going to show us the name of the class it's trying to autoload. So it tells us that it needs to autoload framework slash entry point. Now here I am going to perform a little code to load that class automatically. We are going to normalize the class name. I am going to remove the backslashes, replace them by forward slash, and then I am going to check if the class exists. If file exists, underscore dir dot slash dot slash and then our normalized name and finally dot php. And if it does exist, we are going to load that by using the same file name. Let's run that again. I'm going to go back and refresh. It tells us that routes is not initialized. We need to initialize it first. So let's initialize it as an empty array. Let's go back and refresh again. Now says that slash is not a key of this array. And the reason is that we haven't included the routes.php file. For now, I am going to include that in autoloader. However, usually this would be loaded in another file. For now, we are just trying to keep it simple. So let's go back app slash config slash routes.php, refresh again, and there we go. Now let's take another example. I am going to go back to home controller, add a new method, name that JSON, and we are going to return an array. Let's call that id equals to 1, success equals to true, message equals to JSON data. And now our framework is going to take care of it automatically and it would be able to display that JSON without us having to perform any extra code. Let's go to route.php and we are going to register a new route as well. I am going to do routes get slash JSON and then I am going to do home controller class. A method name is JSON and now to call it I need to add question mark r equals to JSON. This is not going to work, but let's try that out first. It doesn't work because we have specified slash JSON here, but here we have loaded JSON. Therefore, we also need to normalize our route. We are going to normalize that index.php. I am going to do if starts with $r slash $r equals to slash dot $r, save once more. And now our JSON is automatically converted, our headers are attached, and we have valid JSON in our browser window. And there we go. We have the boilerplate ready for framework. This is about 5% of the code that we need to perform in order to make an actual framework. We would need to add an ORM, we would need different types of response, we would need views, rendering, we would also need to structure a code better, we would need configuration, and we are not going to implement any of this right now. If you want me to implement all of this, do let me know in the comments and I am going to convert that into a complete series. But for now, I am going to keep that simple and consider that we have created our very own MVC framework.